Book 1. Nikolai is here. Tigers Fort, south of the Soviet border, Afghan Turkestan. Summer. Juma lay, waiting for death, by the parapet on the roof of his ancestral home. Until 5 weeks ago, he had been a captain of the 7th Infantry Division of the Afghan Army, stationed at Kabul. Then had followed a week under arrest for slandering the Soviet people. As the Russian grip on his country had tightened and the national army crumbled, broken by purges and desertions, Juma had answered a more ancient, more pressing call to duty. He was the 25th hereditary battle lord of Shirkala, Tigers Fort, a mile south of the Soviet-Afghan border, the Oxus River, and he had come home to lead his people and to fight for freedom. It seemed an age since the Russians had invaded Afghanistan, one of the few free countries left on their borders. It was 3.5 years ago. The war was still on. 10 miles up the road from there, the Afghan port of Kizilkala was crammed with tanks, landing craft, Soviet equipment of all kinds. The only halfway decent ship on the mile-wide river was the ancient Afghan gunboat Jibun, busily ferrying the country's gold reserves, precious stones which were mined there, lapis lazuli, emeralds and rubies, and priceless ancient Greek, Buddhist and Islamic artifacts from the collection in the Kabul Museum to help pay for the fraternal assistance of the Soviet limited military contingent, the new masters. The Russians had at last broken through the barrier which had denied them warm water ports of their own. To the south, Pakistan was wide open, all the way to the Arabian Sea. After that, the Gulf, the riches of Arabian oil, and the outflanking of Iran were the next targets. Unless the Afghans still fighting could stop them. 12 to 16 million mountaineers, with only the world's vague sympathy and their own determination on their side. But there was something that might enable the Afghans to evict the invader, reclaim their homeland, win their war. This lay in the secret which Captain Juma had entrusted to the village mayor. What chance was there that the message might get back to a man who might do something, might just turn the tide in time, the man they called the Eagle? Not much. The Russian helicopter gunships had been flying low these last few days. God willing, the summer clouds of North Afghanistan would keep them low, so that someone could, now and then, manage to shoot off a tiny rear rotor, the only way to get them down, if all you had was a World War I British Lee Enfield .303, with second-hand cartridges filled with homemade black powder. Captain Juma, of the former Royal Afghan, now People's Democratic Army, screwed up his eyes to make out the distant profile of the light scouting whirler, and guessed that it must be the forerunner of 2 or 3 more. The big ones they called the village killers. They would have been called up by radio, because this community had harboured badmashes, villains, the communist word for the mujahideen, the strugglers, the resistance. And Juma had his own special reason for wanting them to come. Last night, near Shirkala, the village folk, the yokels, with utter foolishness, had lit a huge bonfire to celebrate the ambush of 3 Soviet tanks just 4 kilometers down the road towards the provincial capital of Turkestan. They had knocked them out in broad daylight too, using only soft drink bottles filled with petrol, plus a little shredded rubber, Molotov cocktails. They had burned out all 3 tanks, though with the loss of 8 men and 5 women of the farming folk. Usually the assault helicopters flew high past here, on their way to deal with the people of the more turbulent Far West, along the plains of the boundary with the Soviet Union. Their targets were the ordinary people of the country, starvelings who tended the fields as best they could during the day, and crept out to attack at night. Just after dawn, the raiding parties, each of 10 to 30 fighters, would return, carrying their wounded from the raid. They would show Russian army paybooks, an officer's gaudy epaulette, boxes of almost unstrikable Estonian matches, buttons, cap badges. Yesterday's day raid had been too successful and far too venturesome for the Russians to ignore. The best times were when the fighters brought back arms, grenades, and ammunition. Often, too, there were things like canned food and candies, boiled sweets from Hungary, which the Nikolais really loved, and metal mirrors. These were, oddly, engraved with the words, in Russian, to be used only for shaving. Sometimes the village women, although most of them had been in action against the Nikolais, would weep when they saw these. Each could see in her imagination another mother somewhere far to the north, saving up to buy one and giving it to her conscript son. "Nikolai, carry it in your left breast pocket. Do it for my sake, you never know." There were letters, too, unposted, to Moldavia, Georgia, the Ukraine, or Byelorussia. Trophies, certainly, but this detritus of death, this rubbish from soldiers' pockets, was the same the world over, sad and irrelevant. Not irrelevant were the loading and defense instructions for the huge secret cargo of the treasure ship, foolishly carried by an overconfident Russian officer on an observation mission in one of yesterday's tanks. That was the sort of information that would change the course of the war. Taken from the Russian's body and carried to Juma, sick and useless, by his men. The local mujahideen were still a travesty of a resistance force. Ragged, ill-equipped, careless and lacking cunning, they needed to be trained. Descendants of warriors, perhaps, but at this rate, how far were they from complete extermination? They were not afraid. Juma accepted that, but they were far from being the kind of soldiers that Afghanistan needed now. Giving themselves away with public displays of exultation at any success, firing shots wastefully and idiotically into the air, they regularly forgot that the cover of darkness was their great asset. Instead of letting the night cloak them, all too often they allowed themselves to be caught in the open in the mornings, hunted by those satanic flying machines. Mind you, there were other fighters, like the seasoned warriors of the Southland, who had had the Soviets on the run more than once, but Juma belonged to Turkestan. A spasm of pain brought his thoughts back to the present. The villagers would not come back, he hoped, not for some time anyway. He lay back on the straw which the blind cobbler, Haji Alim, had brought for him, near the upper turret of the baked clay building. By moving slightly, he tried to ease the pain, but it only increased. He felt the throbbing move higher, up now to his thigh. The wound was massively infected, the leg swollen and going blue. He hadn't been able to get it treated since the guard had slashed him with a bayonet as he jumped the barbed wire that night at Islagar, the ideological correction camp for politically unreliable soldiers, more than a fortnight ago. He had covered over 150 kilometers in 5 days, most of it on foot, but sometimes helped by a friendly peasant with a donkey. Twice it was a man with a truck. He had been planning his escape since he had discovered that his wife, held hostage for his good behavior, had died of ill treatment in the Pulikaki prison. They had no children. Now that Perry was gone, his duty was clear. Juma had got home, had come back here to Tiger's Fort, still in his own uniform, to help train these people, to give them the knowledge he had gained at battle school. Without that, they would be wiped out by those skills that he had learnt, but of which they had only dimly heard. His father had been their Bash Khan, their chief, His family, alone in the village, had maintained the ancient fighting tradition for 700 years. They were hereditary noyons, battle lords, descended from the commanders of the horde of Genghis Khan. And the peasants surely could be trained. They would listen to him. It was really a matter of time, as Major Zaman had said. The Major had been trying to prepare him for this day. Instructor Major Zaman was an ancient veteran of the war with Britain in 1919, the year the Afghans had last regained their independence. He had lectured, speaking truly, that day 10 years ago in the stifling classroom, a hero with the star of Afghanistan on his tunic. Now hear and understand. Cadet Juma had jumped to full alertness, awakened by the raised voice from his daydream of the fair maidens, peglers they called them thereabouts in the soft southern Pashtu, tripping to the brook which he could see through the window from his desk, the meadow bright with buttercups and daisies, and filling their clay jars with the family's daily drinking water. Hear and understand. The Russians will come, make no mistake about it. The Nikolais may pretend to be our allies, but they will really come to rule. They took Kazakhstan in 1855, and that was after signing a treaty of alliance with the Kazakhs. Then they seized Kyrgyzia, and they had northern Turkestan by 1876, 100 years ago. By 1900 they had taken both the countries of the Turkomans and of the Tajiks, just beyond our present border, see here on this map. They have been trying to get into Afghanistan ever since. Next they will cross the Oxus. Any questions on that? Sir, it was Hatim, the tall, fair, keen youngster from Kamdesh, who always asked questions when he had a chance. The aging Zaman had turned a bleary eye on him. That cadet's head looked as if it could do with a shave, but he was sitting at attention. Yes? What's a Nikolai, and why are they called that? Does it mean a Russian, and are they so called because of their Tsar Nikolai? They are the Russians, and most people here know that already. You come from Nuristan, and so you don't know very much, of course. I am not talking about old-time Russian emperors. Cadet Hatim, we are talking about here and now. Nikolai is a proper name with them, just as we call someone, say, Anwar. But to us, Nikolai is like a made-up name. Just analyze it and you'll soon see what I mean. The Major was addicted to illustrating his points with jocular mock etymology. Niko in Dari means good, La means no, so Nikolai means I'm no good. In our interpretation, of course. It's a well-known joke. Now to some practicalities, please. When he was commissioned and posted to Kabul, Juma sat nightly in the capital's cafes, meeting many of the modern youth, the students, some of whom had been to Russia. They would always speak of the friendliness of Russian people, how they took you into their homes, made you welcome, yearned for world peace and universal brotherhood. When he had spoken to the Kabul students of the threat of the Nikolais, how they had laughed. Better read than he, they had explained that the name Nicholas was from the Greek. Translated, it stood for no less than the stirring and idealistic phrase, victory of the people. Was Major Zaman wrong? Juma had wondered. Were the invaders civilizers in disguise? Forgive me for doubting, Major. I know now that you were right. And the students too, perhaps, in their own way. But the sons of those happy, dancing, hugging Nikolais were here in our country today, killing women, maiming children. Victory, but for whom? And no doubt in their barracks and their mess halls, the Nikolais sang and danced as well. All empires spoke of peace and practiced war. What was it that Major Zaman had told them then? You notice that I do not talk of communism. The army is not concerned with politics and never has been. Under whatever banner, Russia is and always has been expansionist. It so happens that Karl Marx, whom the Russians follow, had this to say about them, which I quote from the British scholar Walter Laqueur, who wrote in 1957 in Communism and Nationalism in the Middle East. The policy of Russia is changeless. Its methods, its tactics, its maneuvers may change, but the polar star of its policy, world domination, is a fixed star. The Major lifted his finger in emphasis. In these circumstances, until the Russians do, perhaps, change, what can we in Afghanistan do? The Major had looked sternly at their attentive faces. There are today 200 million people in the Soviet Union. There are 12 million of us. Their army is one of the best equipped in the world, and we could not stand up to it in a conventional war. We cannot hope for outside help. We are a neutral country and always have been such. And nobody has ever helped us in any of our wars. But there is no record in history of a total resistance army, helped by the people, ever having been beaten, however great the odds. Everyone must fight. Some might say that we are outnumbered 16-1. Look at it again like this. There are only 16 of them to 1 of us. But I say, die with honor, but take at least 16 of the enemy with you. Long before they run short of men, they'll lose their stomach for the fight. That's the only language, gentlemen, that the Nikolais really understand. Above all, teach the people. As always, it is they who are our hope. The latest count showed 270 million Soviet people, more than 22-1, but the principle was the same. Juma's thoughts came back to the helicopters. He could hear the rhythm of more motors now. They were not far off. I'm going to die all right, even if they don't see me or pick me up. I'm going to die quite soon. God grant they pick me up. If they did not, the vultures would not be long. Vultures went for the eyes first. He had refused to accept the precious rifle and the 3 pathetic rounds, used cartridges refilled with homemade gunpowder that gave the bullets no real range, which the villagers had offered him when he was sending them away to shelter. In any case, he had been shaking with fever, sweat streaming down his face. What could he shoot in that condition? Sir, Battle Lord, come with us. We'll find you a hakim, a leech. They know the power of herbs. They know how to heal. The mayor spoke urgently. No, Haidar, I'm staying here, and you have work to do. They'll blow you to pieces when they destroy the fort. You know what the rockets can do. Do as I say. I am your chieftain, your Bashkan. What can we do for you then, Bashkan? Carry me outside, up to the long flat rooftop, now. The Nikolais in helicopters are coming soon. How can one argue when one is so weak? But he must insist, must get it done. The mayor, Shardar Haidar, looked at him sideways. Ah, that was it. Captain Juma was very ill. The Russians had all kinds of Frankish medicines, and especially that powerful one called antibiotic, which could cure even the most terrible wounds. They would, perhaps, take him to a military hospital, heal him there, or amputate the bad leg and keep him prisoner, but alive. After all, he was of noble blood and an officer. He might even join the Nikolais. People sometimes did such things from gratitude. Or would the Russians make him talk about the message to the eagle? Things were so confusing. Obey orders, the captain had said. Orders first, and we'll teach you how to think as well. But orders without thinking? Yes, in emergencies. Do it. Take me up, Haidar, and keep watch from the foothills. Learn all you can from watching Nikolai. Always watch, see all you can, ask yourself what you have learnt. It will help the homeland, I truly promise you. Get the message to Kara Kush, the leader called the Eagle. That is the most important thing of all. Now repeat the main points of the message." His fever-bright eyes searched Haidar's face. "By my head and eyes, my Khan. From Juma Shahzada in Turkestan to Commandant Kara Kush, the Russians plan to move the gold treasure of King Ahmad Shah, worth $400 billion, on the gunboat Jihun from Kizil Kala on the Oxus River to the USSR. For God's sake, stop them, the most valuable consignment in history, while we bleed to death for lack of arms." "That's right, Haidar, and don't write it down." "I can't write anyway, Master." "Take me up now, Haidar, you must." "Hearing is obedience, my Khan." The mayor turned to the group of men. "Let's take him up now." They carried Juma gently enough onto the roof, though now they avoided his eyes. Only the blind cobbler, feeling his way unhelped up the rickety ladder, brought an armful of straw and carefully pushed the bent dry stalks under Juma's leg on the dusty parapet. "God sees all, my Khan," he whispered. "I suppose he's sorry for me because he's blind. We're both wrecks," Juma thought. "Just wrecks." The throb of engines. Here they came. They were really near now. A scout, like a dragonfly, and two big gunships, Mi-24 attackers over 50 feet long. The climbing sun glittered on their bulletproof gun blisters. Juma could make out goggled faces now, peering through the front windows of armoured glass. He could sense the bomb aimers ready, the fingers on the firing buttons and the Russian candies, explosive toys for the children to pick up, ready for release. Even after they had destroyed a village, the helicopters made a final pass and dropped, as if in derision, these brightly coloured packages, sometimes imitation playthings, dolls or watches, women's combs, all sorts of knickknacks among the ruins. People came back to rebuild their homes and would find these presents which blew off a hand or a foot, or blinded those who picked them up. The adults soon came to know the toys, but they could never teach all the children not to touch them. The maimed children outnumbered the grown-up victims by 10-1. Captain Juma pulled the fine muslin cloth, the customary 3 meters of white which the villagers had left to be his shroud, foot by foot from the breast of his uniform jacket. Slowly, gasping with the pain, he rolled himself along the flat roof, laying it out as he went. It would do well enough as a signal, showing up better than his grey uniform against the red-brown clay. What a strange sensation. Was it possible to have so much pain that it could no longer hurt? His head swam again. Was he going to black out? Now he saw the picture of a tall young officer standing, smiling in a brand-new uniform, beside a graceful girl who was filling her water jar from a cool stream. That would be the stream which brought the snow water from the mountains beyond Pagman. It flowed here through a meadow, and they were standing in the shade of an immense mulberry tree. "What is your name, Pegla?" he asked. Beautiful as a houri of paradise, she turned her head modestly away. "All right then, don't tell me. I'll run through some pretty girls' names and I'll have guessed it when you blush. But don't misunderstand, I intend no disrespect. I am Captain Juma Shahzada, son of a chief, battle lord of Shakala in the north. We are fighting to liberate Afghanistan. The great Major Zaman was my teacher, you know, when I was a cadet in these parts." A swirling, a stinging of his eyes, and he was back to consciousness. 2 bulky ships were lurching down with their usual thumping clatter, sweeping in decreasing circles. The third one, a longer Mi-8, hovered warily, higher, almost like a hawk. He was sure now. One of the big ones was going to land here on the roof while the other veered away. They had not come to bomb the fort this time. A helmeted figure, the navigator-gunner, was looking straight at Juma through huge field glasses. Juma could now see the 4 munition pods, each armed with 32 57mm rockets fixed on the stubby wings, left and right of the hull. 2 large, finned bombs were ready in their racks. Now it was down, a beautiful landing with no bump at all. The huge rotors, 50 feet in diameter and 14 feet off the ground, were still stirring up the yellow sand and dust. The force of their wind, the downwash, almost blew Juma over the parapet. The stench from the burnt fuel of the twin turbos was overpowering. Although the big exhaust vented upwards, the rotors pushed a blanket of the abundant fumes back to ground level. The baked clay, hard as rock from centuries of sun, was as firm as any landing pad. Juma struggled with his jacket buttons. There, that was all right now. The last task but one. A door opened forward, and the automatic steps came down. Juma could just see the open door and bright lights in the cabin. There were 4 large rectangular porthole windows near him, and beyond them, on the fuselage, a big red star. The insignia of the Soviets, not of the Afghan army. A Russian officer, burly, self-assured, with bright gold lace and red parade shoulder boards, surprisingly formal dress, jumped down and strode straight up to Juma, an automatic, a PM Makarov in his hand. He waved the weapon, speaking in good, though accented Dari Persian. "Stand up and hold still." He looked at Juma's rank, the bars still on his jacket. "I am an Afghan officer, Comrade Capitan, wounded and in need of medical attention, captured by the Badmashes. I can't stand, probably blood poisoning in my leg, it's moving up." "You are former Captain Juma Shahzada, a deserter and a criminal. We know all about you, eater of filth. This is your own home pigsty, isn't it? Thought you'd get away from Islaga, eh?" The Russian kicked Juma on his bad leg. The Makarov was inches from his face now, safety catch off. 1 shot was all it needed. Execution. "Organizing resistance to the lawful forces of the state, and you want treatment for a sore leg? The Nizami card, Afghan state security, can show you, swine, what pain really means." He was going back to prison, Juma thought. The Russian beckoned towards the brown and yellow camouflaged helicopter squatting just 6 yards away. 2 soldiers, immaculate in pressed grey Afghan army field tunics, ran up to carry Juma to the aircraft. The Russian was a captain. These were Afghan majors and of course outranked him, but they ran like eager dogs to do their master's bidding. Juma was feeling very light-headed again. All those officers. Had the communists run out of ordinary aircrew? All this for a miserable Turkestani village? Or to capture the great hero Captain Juma, a miserable dying traitor to the socialist cause, who had never fired a shot in anger? The other helicopters set their courses homewards as the 2 men lugged him, a ragged bundle, distastefully along. Juma was aware of being hauled up into the very roomy cabin. It was, however, crammed with men. 3 Soviet generals, map cases in their hands, binoculars slung round their necks, polished jackboots, gold-wreathed hammer and sickle badges on red stars in their peaked caps, nodded with satisfaction to the men who held him. As Juma was dumped on the floor, the nearest general, a podgy man with the wide face of an Uzbek, looked at him and wrinkled his nose. The suppurating wound stank. Then the Soviet officer assumed a twisted smile and started to speak, his clipped pronunciation telling of his Turkey origins. "Comrade former Captain Juma, isn't it? What an interesting morning, and the day has hardly started. Here we are, studying counterinsurgency in the field, and chuff! On our first time we find a renegade, a traitor, sending his dupes to destroy our tanks in a particularly cowardly way. Yes, you filthy ape, we'll get something really worthwhile out of you, before you're hanged." The general's voice was now hoarse with fury, though he had, at first, tried to be smoothly sarcastic. "He looks just like the devil," Juma thought. "Yes, that's it. The devil, come to carry me away. In a dark, vicious, clattering bird with fetid breath, out of this fair world, heading for hell, Iblis from Jahannam, the devil from hell." Juma's throat ached, and a spasm from his leg made his vision swim. No, not devils, generals. 3 generals. Die for a general? He tried to kill his throat, shifted his arm to ease his leg. It only made the pain worse. No, I mustn't say anything, do anything. No, I am not by that stream of sweet water talking to a village maiden. I'm with the Nikolais. He was shivering with fever, as if someone was shaking him, and now felt icy cold. His head cleared a little as he counted 3 generals of the Soviet army, several other officers, at least one was a major, that one over there. There was sure to be a colonel among them too. Generals always liked to have their sycophants around when they were performing. The Mi-24s, he knew, would carry a crew of 4 as well as 8 fully equipped troops. The Russian captain slammed the armoured door and clipped it shut. "All right, take off now, to Kanabad headquarters." The senior general must be speaking to the pilot through that throat microphone, wobbling on his double chin. The rotorcraft rose and wheeled in a wide arc, gaining height. When it had reached what he guessed must be at least 200 meters high, Captain Juma jerked with all his remaining strength at the string knotted to the ring pulls of the firing pins in the 2 tiny 2¼ inch diameter grenades, strapped to his stomach with his belt. In 3 seconds they would explode. "Juma Shahzada, 25th Hereditary Novon of Shakala, reporting for duty," he breathed. "Come to battle, brave Nikolais." In the foothills near the fort, the small group of farmers, men, women and children from Shakala, crouched sheltering among the rocks, almost invisible in their threadbare grey-brown blankets. 2 helicopters had been and gone away. One had landed, and it would be taking Captain Juma to hospital soon. Ah, there it was now, high up in the sky. First it was there, rising steadily, slightly distorted in the shimmering heat, the very symbol of the invaders' power. Then they saw the orange-red ball of fire, bright even in the sunshine, as the thing exploded, blown into 1,000,000 shards. "Halak Shudand, they're destroyed. The tiara is smashed, blown to pieces. They have gone to hell." Shouting with delight, the mayor tried to describe what he had seen to the sightless cobbler sitting silently beside him. To hell, they've all gone down to hell, Haji!" He was dancing up and down now. Then he sat mute, speechless with ecstasy, gazing into the sky. "It wasn't an amulet I felt after all," said the cobbler, strapped to our captain's stomach. And he was right. Look and you will learn. Remembering Juma, the women began to wail in mourning. "And the battle lord is dead," said Haidar. "I must do as he commanded. He said, 'The task I give you could save our country and perhaps the world.'" Shahrdar Haidar, hereditary weapon-bearer to the lords of Tiger's Fort, shook hands with the remnants of his people. Hands on hearts, they watched him go. He took the dusty road which led southwards through 300 miles of occupied Afghanistan, across rivers and over mountains, to seek Kara Kush, the eagle of Pagman, the man who had dared to raise the flag of rebellion against the most awesome political and military machine in the world. Kara Kush, who had taken up arms in the name of the people of a remote land in Central Asia, best known elsewhere for its dogs and carpets. But as he reminded himself often enough on that long trek, a people who, alone in history, had resisted the all-conquering Arabs for 100 years, not to mention Alexander the Great and the British Empire. Walk, ride, live off the land, trust no stranger, get to the eagle, give him the message, Juma had said. Well, he could and would. He would obey orders. Obedience is the path to command. What had he learnt from the last act of Captain Juma? First, remember the value of a ruse. Second, make any sacrifice. Third, he, Shada Haidar, had thought that his master, the Noyon, could have sought healing from the enemy or might even join them out of gratitude. Don't be mistrustful. Trust Kara Kush, the eagle. Salah da Mujud. How long had it been since the ancient war cry had echoed here? Here am I, the weapon-bearer, going into battle to help save the people whom my forebears, the Mongols, once came to conquer. There were 5 villages, in each of them no more than 200 souls, whose people looked to Tiger's Fort as the centre of their community. With the battle lord dead and the mayor trudging southwards to find the shadowy leader Kara Kush, the villagers returned to their fields and flocks. Kara Kush, after all, might not even exist. If he did, what could he do for Turkestan? Shikasti Kufar, defeat to the infidel, was still the cry of the suicidal young, reared on tales of long ago as they went out to die, riddled by Russian bullets, trying to destroy at least one truck from a convoy of perhaps dozens, as the invaders tightened their hold on northern Afghanistan. And Soviet Northern Afghan Command did not forget the loss of their helicopter, even though they never discovered the real cause. 2 weeks after Captain Juma's death, 4 low-flying aircraft made 3 passes each over the 5 villages. Instead of bombs, large metal canisters landed in the midst of the people, and a yellowish mist filled the village streets. According to the few survivors, those people or animals who were in the open and who breathed the vapour died almost at once. Anyone who touched the powdery deposit which settled on the ground, on walls and plants, also died. Persistent rumours, and the direct accusation of the United States government, had claimed for over 2 years that the Russians were experimenting with yellow rain in Laos, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. According to the reports, this chemical warfare was based on a fungus, the deadly fusarium. Although the Russians hotly denied the charge, it was noted that their scientists had recorded and described cases of accidental fusarium poisoning in the USSR. Many people wondered if it was a coincidence that, after a mysterious substance was dropped by Soviet aircraft, illiterate Asian villagers could accurately report the symptoms of death through the ingestion of mycotoxins of the trichothecene group. They were hardly likely to have read the scientific literature. The agent was extremely effective. Almost everyone who was in contact with the mist died in great agony. It was worse than the plagues of typhus which had claimed so many lives before the Afghan Ministry of Health had stamped out the disease. The Russian convoys were safe, at least for the time being.